Hey guys, today we'll be continuing with the Python video tutorials. We'll be going over nested loops. I believe this is a nested for loop example. In the last example we did a nested while loop. So here we'll just have a constant, so I'm using pycharm as always. So here we'll have num underscore students, or I could just have num students like this. No constant, we'll just say num students points to int. So cast it into the input function, and we'll say how many students do you have. Whoops, sorry. Can't type today. So we have how many students do you have, then we'll say num test scores points to int casted input how many test scores do you have, or how many test scores per student, so how many test scores per student. So here we'll say we'll have a for loop for student in range num students. Actually, yeah, that'll have a double parentheses. For student in range num students. For students in range num students, and we'll have total points to 0.0. I think we could just move that to the top, but we'll just have it here. So we'll just say total points to 0.0, and here we'll print student number, and we'll say student plus 1, which is a student number. We'll print some formatting spaces here. We could do an underscore. Yeah, same thing. So we'll just do dashes here. And we'll say for test num in range num test scores. So notice how we have a nested for loop here. We have one loop running here and one loop running here. So the inside one's going to complete its iterations first. And we'll have we'll print the test number. So we'll say print test number comma test underscore num plus 1. That's all. yeah, that's all. And here we'll say test score. Whoops, sorry, I'm just gonna move something there. Okay, sorry. So we have so after that we have score. This might be a mistake in my notes, so we can fix it after. So we have score points to float casted to a string here, which is just this. I think that's a mistake in my notes. So you have score pointing to, nope, sorry. That should be input function casted to. Might be a mistake, so we'll come back and see if it is. So let's have a calculation here. We'll do an augmented assignment. We went over those in the previous videos. If you don't know what it is, check it out. So it's just a plus and equals, which means total. So I'll show you guys again. If you guys want the full explanation, see the other videos. So we have total plus equals to score. That's equivalent. I'm just going to say it. So it just means total equals to total plus score. So then here we'll have a so we'll just print out another message here. We'll say, or another string for the user, or prompt the average for the student number. Here we'll call student plus 1. And we can have student plus 1. That'll do a calculation here. Then we'll throw a comma in there. So that's going to increment the variable by 1. I was going to add 1 to the variable student. And we'll have excuse me. We can have a plus here. Is actually, that might not concat there. We could have another print here. Actually, we don't need the is. That's just. Actually, we I think we do. Student plus 1. Plus a space. Can we do that? Throw a tab in there. Is pass an average. What's wrong with that? I don't think it likes that it's concated here, so what we can do is we could have format this, or we can just say is here. We can just take this out like that. Whoa, what's happening here? Oh, you know what? I think I messed that up, and I think that would have been fine. Let's see. That good. Got some mistakes here. Okay. 5 mistakes, really? What is the problem here? I don't know if it likes these brackets this time, to be honest. Yeah, that is correct. It does. I think we can change these brackets here to something else. So we could say, what else is a problem here? Unsolved reference. Unresolved reference on. Okay, so let's see. Do we not have an average here? Yep, sorry I missed that. So we had test total plus equals to score. Then we'll have average points to total divided by num test scores. So we'll throw the average in there. Let's just see if we can format this a little bit. So we'll say, where's my thing that slides? Okay, I guess it's not sliding. So we'll have the average for the student number, student plus 1. Can we say this? Doesn't like the plus, does it? It might. It's giving me a warning. I think maybe you could do that. This should work. The average for the student number. That's why I was wondering why it wasn't working. And I saw we had some mistakes. So we have the average for the student number. So it's going to reference this variable, add 1 to it in a math operation, not a string. And here where it's going to print another string is. So we're kind of concatenating this whole thing. And then here we're going to pass in the average variable. We're going to print that out. So the average for the student number, comma, student plus 1. So it's going to, yeah, so you guys get the idea. So let's just show what's happening here for that. So we have num students points to this input, which is going to be how many students do you have. Then num test scores points to how many scores per student. Per student in range num students. So remember, range is going to be 0 to num students minus 1. Because the range only goes to, the range starts at index 0 and goes to that number minus 1. We could have said first, or we could have maybe changed this to like, for I, you could have made it less than a value, like less than 10, less than or equal to. If it's less than or equal to, it's equal to 10 as well. It's going to do 11 iterations. If it's less than 10, it's going to just do 10 iterations. So in this case, it's set using the range. We're doing it with the range. The loop, we're looping with the range. We're saying we want to iterate 0 to num students minus 1 times. Set total. We set a total variable here, which is a float. Print this. So let's go through it. So I set a breakpoint here. I'll save and debug it. Start debugging that. Alright, so here we'll just enter something for how many students do you have. Let's say we have 3, we'll hit enter. How many test scores per student? Let's say we have 2, we'll hit enter. Whoops, did I mess that up? I think I did. Start again. I didn't hit the step over button properly, so here we'll step over that. How many students do you have? We'll enter 3. Step over. How many test scores per student? 2, I'll hit enter. Per student in range num students. So we can check our variables what it is. Num students is 3, so it's going to iterate 0. Sorry, 3 times 0 to 3. Num students minus 1, which is 0, 1, 2, so it's going to be 3 iterations. 0th iteration, then 1 iteration, 2 iteration. So the best way to say it is like 0th iteration, is that right? No, yeah, so 0th iteration, then iteration 1, then iteration 2. So it starts at 0, adds 1, continues to 3 minus 1. Excuse me. So here we'll have, so it's going to start at iteration 0. It should say student points is 0 at this time. Step over that, total points is 0.0. Step over that, prints us a prompt here, student plus 1. So, or why is it student number 1? It's because student starts at 0. So it's going to, the calculation automatically in the code is going to say, okay, well, we're going to take our student variable, add 1 to it, so it goes 0 plus 1. It's going to print 0 plus 1, whatever that is, which is 1. Student number, so it really printed student number space 1. That's what we told it to do. Here we step over, that prints us some kind of spacing, formatting for our strings and stuff, just to show like a box. Then here we're just printing these symbols, right? We're not doing anything with that. Then here we have a nested loop here. So we're saying, okay, for test num. So we're creating a variable test num. That's going to be our target variable. That's what they call it in Python. I just call it an iterator, like our iterator variable, which you can call it I or J. So we could have called this I and J. We could have called it student I and test num J. That's what I would have done if I was coding this on the fly by myself in a project or like in an app. For an app, I would have called the first loop I and the second loop J. That's conventional across like programming languages. Mostly C, Java, C++, object-oriented stuff. They use I and J. So I would have just used it because it works for me. It works as a nest. So I could have used that to nest the variables like that. But it doesn't matter really. Whatever you want, whatever you're most comfortable with, whatever feels the best. When you type it out, if you think it feels good, then go with that. If you type something else out and it feels better, then go with that. So just go whatever you want. Go with whatever feels like the best. Then here, so we'll step in. So for test num, because you're gonna be doing that like a million times. You're gonna be writing loops. If your job's to code, you're working for a company or you're coding some stuff, then you're going to be doing these loops a million times, so you have to pick something that you like to do all the time. Something that's fast too, so you don't want to be typing out something like long words all the time. So here we have, so for test num in range num test scores. So we're going to create a variable test num. We're just going to call it test num. That's going to point to each iteration. Now we're looping through the range num test scores. Our num test scores is 2, we said. So it's going to say, okay, for test num in range 0 to 2, or 0 to 2 minus 1. So it's just going to iterate twice, 0th iteration and iteration 1, so that's 2 iterations. So on iteration 0, we step in, print this test number, then test. So now we're going to take test num, add 1 to it, we're going to print that. So test num comes from our variables here. That's going to be, test num is 0 on our first iteration of the loop. So it's going to print test number, then 0 plus 1, which is 1, so test num space 1. Test number space 1. It's going to calculate the score. Score points to float input. Okay, so this was, wait a minute. This is what we say we might have a mistake here. I'm just going to hit enter. Yeah, that's a mistake, okay. That sucks, because we're deep into the code at that point, so that's a mistake in my notes here, so we'll just take that. What are we going to do with it here? Okay, so average equals total divided by num test scores. We have a score variable here. Oh, you know what? I think we're supposed to enter something. Yeah. That might have been my bad there. So let me just skip through that back to there quickly. How many students we had? We said 3. Hit enter. Step over. How many test scores per student? We'll say 2. That's what we said. We stepped into the loop. Step over, step over, step over, stepped into the second loop. Then we stepped in. We waited for a score. Okay, so we'll say 90. Hit enter. There we go. So total equals to total plus score. So our total at this time is 0.0. So it's going to be a running calculation again. We have our total points to 0.0. If we step over, it's going to update to 90. Average equals total divided by num test scores. Total 0 at this time. No. Sorry, talking to my cat. So we have average points to total. Yeah, so what's our total divided by? Should we have a total here? That's alright, so we just have average points to total divided by num test scores. So we have, where's our average? 45? What was total? No, we had total equals to total plus 1, 90. Okay, that's all good. You guys get the idea here. I'm getting confused on what I wrote. So we have for test num in range. So it's going to iterate to iteration number from 0 to now we're in iteration 1, which is really the second iteration. Print the test number, score will enter 100. Total equals to total plus equals to score, which means total points to total plus score. Average is the new average. 95. The average for student number, student plus 1, is average. We only had 2 tests, so I think that'll skip because we had num test scores is 2. So see what happens after that loop. So just to show what happened. Once this finishes its iterations, it has to complete its full cycle of iterations. The inner loop has to iterate through its full cycle of iterations before the outer loop iterates to its next iteration, if that makes sense. So if this is on its 0th iteration, as we said, this has to finish iterating. In this case, it only iterated twice, so iterated 0th iteration, then the next iteration, which is number 1. So 0th iteration, then the 1 iteration, so 2 iterations. Once that was finally done iterating, we came back to the top, and the outer loop finished 1 iteration, because the inner loop finished all of its iterations. Now this outer loop has several more iterations to do, because it still has student 2 and student 3 to do, which through that this will iterate fully another 2 times. In total, this will have iterated fully 3 times. So if that makes sense, we'll just continue on. Where did that debugger go? Okay, so we'll continue with that here. For student in range, num students. For student in range, num students. So now we're at iteration 1, because before we were at student 0, now we're at student 1. Because our num students is 3, we went from the 0th iteration. Now we're at the 2nd iteration, which is iteration 1. It'll finish on iteration 2 after that one's complete. So you guys get the idea. We'll just enter a score. Then it's gonna go to it's gonna finish its iteration to the 2nd one. Enter another score, 100. See what's happening here. Average for student number 2, average for student number 1 is going to finish all the students. It's going to finish student 1, 2, 3. The 2 tests for student 1 was done. Now we have to do the last student step in. We're still in range here, so it stepped into the for loop because this loop was still true. We're still in range -1. Right? So now total set to 0 again. Print. Now we're in for test num in range num test scores for the student 3 this time. Enter a score. 100. Enter a score. Now for the 2nd test score, now the inner loop is on its 2nd iteration. Enter a score, 100. Whoops. Average for student number 3 was printed. The average for student number 3 is 100. I think we got messed up on some kind of one of the math things. So that's okay. So you guys get the idea. So we have, now this has finished its iterations. It's going to be false because it's range 0 to 2. Now we're on iteration 3. So once 0 to 2 minus 1. So now we're on the 3rd iteration, which is 2. So now if we step in, it's false, so it won't let us step in. So it's going to step back up to the next. After this line of code, it's going to go to the next line of code, which there isn't. It just, since that's the end of the inner loop, it just goes up to the upper loop, the outer loop. Now we're done with the range because that was the last student. So hopefully that makes sense. So here's the output. How many students do you have? How many test scores per student? So we got student number 1. I think we forgot a spacing there. So this is for student number 1. We have test number 1. Then we have the average for student number 1 is. Then we have the running total for the averages, and we do student number 2, same idea, then does student number 3. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're just gonna end on that note for nested for loops. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Hopefully you guys understand for loops, nested for loops in this case. They're easy to understand. We'll be using them a lot more, so you guys will see them. If you're still confused, don't worry. Continue with the tutorials. we'll be using them all the time. And yeah, so you can nest while in a for. You can do for in a while, for in a for, a while in a while. We did a while in a while last time. So yeah, so we'll be moving into maybe a few more things, and we'll be getting into functions. So if you guys like the video, you can give me a thumbs up if you want. You can share the video with your friends. You can subscribe to the channel for more content, more programming languages, investing, trading stuff. You guys are into that, making trading robots, whatever, in code. So yeah, so thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.